Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our new webinar for the UNO platform release 4.10. I'm going to be joined by our fellow UNO platform developers, Nick Randolph, Steve Bilogan, Dan Siegel, and Pedro Jesus, which I'm adding to stage right now. Welcome, everyone. We're going to be talking a lot about all the UNO platform 4.10 features and all that's been taking us busy for the past few months. And we're going to be all hands-on with all those new features. No slides, just a bit of things going through the content that is available in our blog post, which actually I'm going to be showing you right now. So if you go to our website, we had our blog post that details everything that we have currently for the release. And we're going to go through one of the cool features that has been keeping us busy, which is the MAUI community toolkit to embed MAUI controls in your apps. We're going to go through also the support for that's a new that's not the 4.10 release actually. Then going through all the samples that we have published, then the ShadowContainer support, which is a cool feature that Steve Bilogan and team has been working on. It allows you to do some interesting and new looks. So for your controls, also lightweight styling, very nice feature. I'm going to go into details for this, which allows you to do very small changes to controls so that they look the way you want. And as well as hot restart and also CSP browser support. We won't go into details for that one because it doesn't show very well, but I'm going to talk a little bit about this one right now, which is the ability for browsers, for applications in WebAssembly to use the new content security, or not the new, but the content security policy support. Previously in .NET 7 and previous versions of UNO, that wasn't working properly. So if you enable CSP so that for site scripting and other features like this wouldn't work, and your app wouldn't work properly, so we benefit from the security features that are enabled better in that context. Now, if you upgrade to the latest version of UNO 4.10 and to .NET 8, you're going to be able to enhance the security of your app when running in WebAssembly. If you want to go into more details for this, please take a look at those links here, so you can improve your app. So that's it, pretty much. We're going to go into the demos, and we're going to start with Nick, who's going to show us some interesting things.
Hey everyone, so we're going to run through a bunch of different demos, particularly focused around the .NET MAUI embedding, and we're going to start off with Syncfusion. And to start with, I'm going to start walking through the sort of the getting started of an UNO app, and then we'll show you how you actually add MAUI embedding to it. So as you can see on the screen, this is the sort of the typical create new project wizard screen. And so we're just going to step into this, and we're going to go ahead and create a new project. So I'll call this Syncfusion webinar app, and go ahead and create that. Hitting create button, obviously this is going to bring up the UNO template wizard, which we're going to step through very quickly because there's a couple of new features in here, particularly around MAUI embedding. So we're going to go with the blank option. So this gives you basically a default app with none of the extra bells and whistles that the platform has to offer. And we'll use that as the starting point for this app. We're going to go ahead and customize because neither the blank or the default actually includes the MAUI embedding by default. So you actually need to go in and customize it. And so the first customization we actually need to do is under platforms. We actually need to remove the targets that are not supported by .NET MAUI embedding. So .NET MAUI embedding basically covers iOS, Android, Mac Catalyst, and Windows. So we need to remove web, and we need to come down here and remove GTK. The next thing we're going to do is just jump through two features. I will come back later and do a demo with the other sections of the wizard. But for now, we're just going to jump to features. And down here, there's a new option to enable MAUI embedding. So I'm going to tick that, and we'll go ahead and click create. This will take a couple of minutes to settle in. What we should have here is our newly created Uno application. And as you can see, so we've got our platforms, so targeting mobile, which includes iOS, Android, Mac Catalyst, and then Windows. And down here, we've got the Uno class library, and then we've got one additional library that's going to be where all our MAUI controls are going to be embedded. And so we're going to go ahead and actually make sure this is all built and running. So I'll hit reload and make sure that it reloads the project correctly. And I'm going to go ahead and actually just force a rebuild on the Windows project as much as anything to make sure everything's building it nicely. Now, the first thing we're going to need to do is, since we're going to be demoing Syncfusion, is to go and add a reference. And so in order to do that, we can add that directly to our MAUI controls library. And we're going to then go and add a Syncfusion control to our embedded control, which already exists here. Now, you might be wondering where this embedded control gets surfaced in the app. So let's actually expand out the Uno class library, and you'll see our main page here. So if I double click on there, you can see that this is basically the Hello World style layout. So we've got our Hello Uno platform text block, and then immediately underneath there, we've got this MAUI host element. And essentially, this is where your MAUI controls are going to render in the UI. So you can change the layout, you can position it where you want it to. And probably the most important thing to note here is that the source property defines the MAUI control that you're going to render. Now, you can render MAUI controls directly from third-party controls, but the guidance that we have here is that you have a control under MAUI controls that you then bring in and reference here in the source property. The other thing to note here is that the data context that will be set on the MAUI host that flows down through the layout of the page will actually be set as the binding context for the MAUI control that gets rendered. Okay, so there's obviously different terminology for the same thing, but it's important to know that the data context will actually flow by default onto the binding context of the MAUI control. All right, so let's go ahead and actually start adding in Syncfusion. So we're going to right-click on our MAUI controls and go Manage NuGet Packages. And I'll go Browse. We'll actually pick NuGet.org. And we're just going to search for Syncfusion MAUI. And we're going to go ahead and grab the charts. And so I can just go ahead and install that on my MAUI control library. Now, I don't actually need to go ahead and actually add it to any of the others. But what I am going to do is make sure that we're in a nice buildable state. So I'm just going to immediately force a rebuild on that to make sure everything's restored and everything's building correctly. Okay, so that looks like it's going ahead. The next thing we're going to do is that most of these third-party control libraries also require initialization. And so again, under the MAUI control library, you'll see that there is already an app builder extension method that you can override. We won't go into detail about how that then gets wired up into the overall application, but it's already there in the template that gets created for you. So we'll go ahead and actually add in the method to wire up Syncfusion's MAUI controls. And then the next thing, we're going to go back to our embedded control, which currently just has, it's almost like the default MAUI app. It's basically got an image, a label, and then a counter that increments the label. And so we're going to replace that with a control from Syncfusion. So let me just go and add in the namespace up the top here. And then we're going to go and grab the chart control. And I'm just going to copy and paste it because you don't really want to watch me type here. So I'm going to drop that in. And so you can see here that we're basically using a circular chart. It's a pi series. It is going to have a local view model. We're going to have to bring in that code as well. And so we'll just switch to the code behind. So I'll do view code. I'll delete the initial code. This is the one that does the counter increment. And I'm going to drop in this big wad of code that you had to take my word for it. That it is a view model. It's this pi series view model, and it basically has some sample data that we're going to wire up in our control. Now, the only thing I need to do is actually define this local namespace. So I'll come back up here and do that in here as well. Equals Syncfusion. If I could spell correctly, there we go. And we should be in a pretty nice spot to then actually go ahead and run this. Now, there is one little gotcha with the Sync Fusion control as it currently stands. Because of their license model, and I'm just running using the trial at the moment, it will display a pop-up. There's a slight quirk to that that requires a slight adjustment to our main page. And I just need to basically set the source. Instead of setting it in XAML, I just need to set it in the loaded event on the main page. This is a known issue that we're currently in the process of trying to work through with the Sync Fusion controls. So let's go ahead and try running this. And this will take a minute or two just to spin up, show you the output window as it goes. And what we should see when it displays is it'll prompt us about the license, and then hopefully it will show us our pie graph. There we go. And in the background, unfortunately, the pop-up actually just didn't show the animation, but it did animate as it displayed in the background. Okay, that's it running on the on Windows, and we can come in here, switch to mobile target, and come down here, and I can go. And there's a quirk here again. If the mobile targets aren't showing properly, what you need to do is basically just unload this project, reload it, and fingers crossed, when I set this to be the startup project, Visual Studio will detect that it can pick up the various emulators and devices. I'll go ahead and pick my Android emulator. And rather than waiting for it to build, I'm going to switch across to my Android emulator and grab the version that I ran up before. And so here you should see, again, the pop-up to basically prompt about the license. So I can go OK on that, and the pie graph immediately behind it. And that's it for the Sync Fusion controls. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Pedro, who's going to walk through the community toolkit.
Excellent. So let's see what Pedro has to share. Hey, Pedro.
Hello, how are you doing? So today I will show off the Visual Studio running on Mac OS application, and I will do a highlight on the command line tooling. Since Nick showed off the wizard, now we will see, like for people that likes terminal, how we can create applications with MAUI embedding using the terminal. So here we are. The first thing that you have to do is have our UNO templates installed. If you don't have, it's pretty easy to do. Just run a .NET new install and UNO template, then that will install everything for you. And I will not do that here right now because, demos, things can go wrong. So let's just create a UNO application using the terminal. So I will grab here the command that I have, and let me zoom this a little bit. So I am telling here that I will create a .NET new UNO app, that is our template. Then I will do a preset blank because I want a blank template. I don't want anything installed with it. And I have the dash MAUI that specifying that I want to use the MAUI embedding. And I will also do the server as false because I don't want a backend API. And I dash O because I just want to give it a great name. So I will be UNO amazing app. And I will press enter. And then it will start to create my application. While this is going, let's come here on the Visual Studio Code, and I want to show you two things that you need to do to be able to run UNO platform applications on your VS Code. So first of all, let's search for the UNO platform extension and make sure that you have it installed and it's coming from platform.uno. Okay, so grab that extension and install on your VS Code. Then you can go to settings right here, and you needed to find for use OmniSharp and make sure this checkbox is selected. If that is selected the first time, the Visual Studio Code, you install some bits of the Omni, but that don't take too much time. And after that, you are good to go, okay? And a friendly reminder that today, the UNO platform extension still doesn't work very well with the dev kit, but on our docs, there is ways on how you can have both extensions working on your VS Code. So check that out if you need it. So bring it back here again. So I finished the terminal. The terminal finished to install the template in my application. But and now I will open the folder here on my Visual Studio Code. So let's find that folder here and amazing app. So let's give some time to the extension to start up. And while we are awaiting, let's take a quick look on our project here, structure. So we have the VS Code folder where is added everything that needs to run on VS Code. And we also have our MAUI controls project and folder here. Then here is where all the MAUI code and plugins should live, as Nick mentioned before. And here we have our class library project with our UNO application, okay? So now I will show off the community toolkit extension. This is an amazing library. If you don't know, it's the best library. And I'm not saying that just because I'm one of the guys that built that, but it's pretty amazing. So here, since we are using the package manager to control our package versions, so let's add here the community toolkit.maui. So we added the version here on this file, directory.package.props. If you are on Visual Studio, as Nick showed, the NuGet package manager will do all the work for you. So no need to worry about that. But here we are doing this way. If you are a command line person, you can install the NuGet package using the command line as well, okay? And here on my MAUI CS project, I will add the reference to that project. So since I am doing everything here, just let's create the item group for that. And I will replace here the version to a reference. And I will delete the version since we are controlling the version as well, okay? So I just do a quick restore here to the Visual Studio, finds the reference there. And the first thing to do is go to the app builder extensions file and add the line to use the MAUI community toolkit. So I'll just copy that code here real quickly and boom. And I needed to import some usings and the Roslyn didn't find that, so not a problem. We do that. And now we should be good to go. And yeah, everything's happy. And I will show up the drawing view control, okay? So here we have the our vertical stack layout. This is the main landing page of the new project of the MAUI template. So I will just bring here the community toolkit. And since I have already the toolkit here, the namespace, so I don't need to add that again. So let's go through this control, okay? So I have here the drawing view from the community toolkit. I use it here, since it's MAUI word, so height request and width request to give you a size. Using fuchsia for the lining color because fuchsia is amazing color, why not? Lining width with 5, so it's not too, it's a nice width, I believe. And here I have two properties, that is multi-line mode enabled and should clear on finish. And I use bindings here. And I want to show you that you can communicate view models between the MAUI world and the UNO world. So our view model will not live here on the MAUI control project, but we will live on our UNO project. And let's go to the code behind here. And let's delete this old code. And I want also to show you that we can debug MAUI applications using our extension on Visual Studio Code. So I will do something pretty simple here just to show off. So I have here my, using my reference to the drawing view control that I gave the X name there, and I am subscribing to the property change event. And every time that the property name is line mode enabled, this breakpoint will be hit. So you will see that we will be able to debug the MAUI worlds on our UNO extension. So, you know, you have everything that you needed to be productive. So now let's jump off on our UNO application. And we have here our main page. And this is a WinUI 3 XAML from the UNO side of the thing. So it's a little bit different from the .NET MAUI XAML. So I will just add some code here to make to toggle the UI. So let's paste it here and boom. Let me break the line to give you a little bit more room. And I have those here. And as you see in this, I am using the binding here, and causes the name of the binding be the same, but don't need to be the same as the MAUI world, but in this sample makes sense to be the same name, okay? And here I will create my view model. So let's grab the code for the view model. And boom. And here I will use the community toolkit.mvvm that I'm pretty sure you know about it, because it's a pretty famous library. If you don't know, please check that out. It's amazing and a lot of time saver. So let's add that again.
Just before you continue, Pedro, there was one question that was raised a bit before by Mark Patterson that basically asked what would be the best way to communicate between the MAUI host and the control and the UNO app, and that is one of the good ways to do it.
Yeah, using MVVM. If you are an MVVM person, you can also use MVU and the kind of stuff. But I believe that it's good to mention that through the bindings, we can communicate between UNO world and MAUI world, right?
Exactly. So that's one of the best ways. Nick would probably be able to comment a little bit more on that part where using the MAUI host. I don't remember. There are specific pieces that we can set directly on the host.
Yeah, so at this stage, basically, the only thing that really gets set on there is the data context, and then you're doing all of the data binding on the sort of the MAUI side of things. Yeah. So, and as I mentioned, that sort of data context flows into the binding context, which is how Pedro is going to get the view model side of things to work. So, yeah.
Exactly. So go ahead, Pedro.
Okay, so continue adding the MVVM toolkit on our project. And since I wanted this MVVM toolkit to be available just on our class library, I will add the head.
Oh,
and just changing this up here. So with that, we are pretty much good to go, but just a final highlighting here that I needed to add the, let's do a restore, and I needed to add some using here. So to do that, I will just build the project. That way I can, let's see if the Roslyn will help me. Yeah, now I can do this using here, and now everything is happy. And just a friendly reminder that community toolkit .mvvm uses source generators. So whatever I have this attribute here, it will create the property to me on the generated file. So because of that, I need to have this as a partial class, and this will handle everything for me. I'm not sure if Visual Studio Code has support for generated files, but look like doesn't, but it's there, trust me. And the final step is to do our data context and instant change that as a main view model. And thank you, GitHub Copilot, for completing that line for me. So let's run our application. So first of all, we needed to choose where we want to run this puppy. So I will click here. As you can see, there is a solution filter, a solution if you're on Visual Studio for Windows, and it will pop up all the projects that we can run. So I will choose the mobile one and give some time to the tooling to think and look around all the iOS simulators that I have here. So I will run this one on Mac Catalyst first, and you choose this Mac, but you can also run on Rosetta, that is the emulated version for the old 64 bits if you are not on the ARM one.
So just one thing, Pedro, on this part where when people are using VS Code, that's one of the things that happens very frequently, to forget to select the actual project or that needs to be debugged. So when you see on the lower side of the status bar, Pedro just selected everything here. If you don't see anything happening, make sure to select the mobile application or WebAssembly application, depending on which target you want to debug on. But that's very important. Otherwise, Visual Studio Code will not show you anything. So that's a common misconception, particularly for people that are coming from Visual Studio, where the things just laid out for you the right way. Visual Studio Code will not help you that much, so you need to know about that specific part.
Yeah, great reminder. And let's do a debug. You can just press F5, but I'll do the long path here. I will select Uno Platform and Mobile and press this play button here, and now the project will build and initiate my application. And also a reminder that Nick mentioned on his presentation that we have this app.cs and the template already hook up the MAUI embedding for us. So using MAUI embedding controls, and for any reason, if you need to instantiate something, the initialization of the MAUI world and the UNO world, you can do right here, because here you have access to the MAUI app builder, and you can create anything else that you want to do. So here I am with my Mac Catalyst presentation, and I have my drawing view right here. So it's just working with the amazing fuchsia color, and I will do the multi-line one. And as a promise, here we have the debug working. So my property just changed to the is multi-line mode enabled. And you can see if I hover my mouse over the property, I can have the value of it, but I also have access to all the locals. So this is the drawing view object, and I can access all the properties. So you have the full debug experience here, which is pretty much amazing. So let's remove this breakpoint here and continue. And now with the multi-line one, I can keep drawing and this will not finish. And if I click on finish, every time that I finish it to draw, the canvas will be empty. And as friendly reminder, I am using MVVM here. So, and those values, those 4 controls here are UNO controls, and this one is the MAUI control. So they are interoperating between each other and working through the MVVM bindings.
That's a very important part, because that means that we can mix and match, UNO controls in the whole app and have multiple islands and embeddings that are part of the whole app running, and you can mix and match, and that's pretty powerful, because you can use all the ecosystem that's already available for MAUI and include that into your UNO app for the targets that MAUI is supporting. And that one is particularly important. So with regards to the targets that we're supporting, we're talking about Mac Catalyst, iOS, Android, and Windows. So that's those are the targets that you want to support. And then if you want to go to the web, then you need to find a different alternative there. But that's a very nice demo to show all the features that we can get between the 2 targets.
Yeah. Okay. And okay, it's just because I pressed play again, so it's got crazy. And to finish up, let's just do the mobile one to make sure that everything is working. And on the mobile one, I can choose for all my simulators, and I choose to the iPhone Pro. And let's run this puppy again. And you should see basically the same thing, and with the same debugging capabilities and everything that you need to do. Okay, it's running. Let's bring the simulator here. Multi-line, and let's see how that goes. Yeah, my amazing skills with the mouse. So yeah, we have this running on the on the iPhone Pro simulator on my macOS using the Visual Studio Code, and this is pretty much amazing. And I cannot wait to see whatever you will build with these new features. So remember to, whatever you are building something amazing, share with us on the Twitter. We will love to see that.
Definitely, anything that you can share publicly that you've done with your applications, and anything, particularly MAUI embedding for this particular session, but anything else that you're doing, we're always interesting to see. So that was a very good demo, Pedro. Thank you very much. It's amazing to see that we can mix and match controls like this. Just as a reminder, what we've been seeing here is it's an application that runs. So your MAUI, it's an application that debug on a Mac using Visual Studio Code that can target iOS, Android, and Mac Catalyst. It's completely local, and you can see that it works pretty well. And it's using the UNO platform VS Code extension. We saw also that we can do data context moving between targets, so that's pretty nice. And you can share the data context and data bind properly. So our next demo will be with Dan, and I can add Dan right now. Hello, Dan, and he's going to show us some very cool things.
Hello, how are you doing? Yeah, so
I
I
think the
did want to
audience is
actually
doing
cover
great.
one thing that we didn't talk about. So I do want to cover one thing that we didn't quite cover, which is in that interop between the Maui world and the WinUI world. The Maui host actually does expose that control. So even though in XAML there we're just giving it that type reference. So let me just kind of jump in, let's see what page would it be. I think it's this flex grid. We could sample spot, and I will bump up my sizing in a second. My computer is lagging hardcore this morning, so I apologize to everybody for that. It is obnoxiously slow. So if I were to give this, say, an X name, and we'll call this, host, right? Now I finished typing, and there we go. This is going to drive me absolutely crazy this morning. Visual Studio is not my friend today. So if we come in here to the code behind, and I say, okay, I want the host. Eventually we'll get our stuff working. Because write an API doesn't mean remember everything in it. Perhaps I can, what was it?
So Dan, for some reason, you're cutting off. It looks like your machine's probably overwhelmed somehow. I think we're going to be moving back to Pedro, who had an additional demo to show us. So let's jump back a little bit, and then if you can take a look at your machine, so we can make it work again. Pedro, are you still ready to do an additional demo?
Yep.
Let's jump back.
So jumping back, I want to show you the amazing Telerik controls, all right? So I will not recreating this because there is a lot of shenanigans to do, but we have this as a simple page, then you can share later with our customers and users. But here we have the Telerik application running a lot of MAUI controls and while we are doing this interop. So the first control is the accordion control where it's working when you expand and you can collapse another controls. We also having our bed view control here, where you can do on the tabs or on the lists as well, if needed. We have a data grid control, where is a very, very used control for line of business application. And for better visibility, it also re-renders when you are on the landscape mode. So that way you can have a way better visibility. And just remember that it can work with bindings and between Uno and Maui sides. Remember that Nick showed off create a view model on the Maui control project, and I showed the create on the Uno and communicate between those spaces. So you can do that as well. We have more charts here if needed, more enterprise ones. And we have a PDF viewer. Not sure about all developers, but when I was doing mobile applications, this was a very, very requested feature. So now we can have that using this amazing Telerik control, and we are good to go with zoom capabilities and resizing the document. And we have the gauge control as well if needed to want to show off some values on IoT. And I just have a random numbers here, okay, pulling here and there to show how this is animated and how that worked. So again, we have everything that you have on the amazing controls on the .NET MAUI, we also have on Uno, and you can mix those two great words together.
That's very nice. You know, lots of cool controls that can be shown up. You know, the data grid. Do you have a way to show the? I'm just throwing you a curveball here. Do you have a way to make the data grid run on Catalyst as well? Because data grid on a small machine is not easy, but somehow on the bigger one, does it help?
Well, let's see. I'm not sure if the. Oh, I don't think the Telerik has Mac Catalyst support for that.
Okay.
So yeah,
well,
sadly will not be able to show that
No
off.
worries,
But
that happens. So that's one other thing that's interesting. So we're using when we're integrating controls inside of an Uno app, but basically we're using the same code that the third-party vendors are providing. So if there's a missing platform or a missing target, then that's something that we can't change. But definitely, if that is of interest to some of you, please let them know by opening issues on their end so that they can fix that and add additional support for that
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's very nice. So so I think we can go now to our next presenter, which is Steve. Hello, Steve. Are you ready for your awesome lightweight styling and shadows demos?
Yes, I am ready.
Very good. Well, let's go.
Good. All right. So, hello everyone. So the first thing I want to talk about with the release that we got out is this great new control that we have coming from the Uno toolkit, and it's the shadow container. And so we'll just give you sort of a little demo of sort of its capabilities and what you can do with it. So right now, what we're looking at right now is I'm just in the Uno gallery, right? So we're running the WebAssembly app of the Uno gallery released. So everyone could just go to gallery.platform.uno and go down to, right now, we're in the toolkit section, in the Uno toolkit section, and the shadow container demo is what we're looking at. And so what we're looking at right now is just this little control that we built called the Shadow Builder. And it just gives you sort of all the capabilities that you can play around with the shadow container itself, right? So right now we have this this grid that contains these list of shadows that we have, and they're connected to obviously the shadows that are around the grid itself, around the control. And so we can play around with this. You can have inner, you can have outer shadows, which is really important for what we're going to show next. You can mess with the opacity, the blur, which is really cool. So if I change the blur to just 1, we see this purple is a little, doesn't have anything nice looking to it now. It's sort of just opaque. But the more you go, the more it has a blur. You can spread it out like crazy. So, if we set a blur of 40, you have this insane spread of your shadow that you can do whatever you want. So you can play around with all these fun properties. And if we were to look a little bit at the XAML for this, so the XAML is a bit busy in the sense that there's a lot going on here. And so this grid basically is where our control is. That's that main container. But the interesting stuff we're looking at right now is the shadow container itself. Oh, yeah, okay. Is the shadow container itself. So if we're looking something at here, so if we're looking at this shadow that we're talking about right now, this Uno pink shadow, that is connected right here. So you see that right now we have this shadow container that we're going to wrap anything. So you can wrap anything you want around using a shadow container and add your shadows to the collection of the shadow container. And basically it will then project shadows onto or behind the surface of the content that you wrap your shadow container in, right? So we have our shadow container here. And like I said before, you have your blur radius, your offsets, your opacities, your spreads, your colors, all that fun stuff. And you can add as many shadows as you want. I'll get rid of this. It's a little busy now with all my markups. You can add as many shadows as you want. Do whatever you want with them, make highlights, change the colors of the shadows. And so this is very, very powerful. It's a very powerful control that we can use. And basically with this, we have the ability to do a lot of cool things. So just as a taste for what we can do with this is basically, I'm going to close this, is what we have in the shadow container sample as well, below the shadow builder, are these set of neumorphic styles. And so neumorphism, if we want to take a quick look, is just sort of, if we go to neumorphism.io, it's just a good example of what it is. It's basically a way to use shadows and highlights to make the visual appearance of your elements as if they're bulging or concave or, like all this fun stuff, all using shadows and highlights. And so because of the power of shadow container with the multiple shadows that you can add with inner shadows, outer shadows, all that fun stuff, you do have a lot of capabilities. And so what we basically did is we took a lot of the controls based off of the material styles. So the material styles that live in Uno material, as well as the Uno toolkit material styles for the Uno toolkit controls. And we utilized the shadow container within the templates of these styles, and to make very interesting things. So I don't know if we want to zoom in, maybe. Zooming, scaling does not work well. Anyway, you see these buttons. So we have these shadow containers around these buttons that have, they indent when you press them. If we look at something really cool, like within our Uno toolkit, we have more complex controls that are available. Things like the tab bar, right? So if you want to have a bottom tab bar or a top tab bar or some sort of floating tab bar for navigation, for switching views, anything like that. We do have really cool, I really love this demo. We have really, really cool neumorphic styles using the shadow container for, the selected states of the tabs themselves. The tab bar itself appears if it's floating, and we have this indented style. We also have the bulging fab buttons, and when we have, the selected states, as well as the, that, like I mentioned, that fab button that shows up with the flyouts, and it's really interesting. So we do have a lot of, as well as the chips, like chips are another Uno toolkit control. Or another control coming from Uno material, but they are available, and we have those neumorphic styles that they're indented and they look like appear as if they're floating. So that's just like some of the things that you can sort of do with shadow containers, and it's just sort of to show the capabilities. So we do have a set of styles within the gallery itself.
That's very nice.
Yeah.
So we have a few questions that have been popping up on the chat. So the first one will be that the shadow container run on Linux?
Yes. So yeah, it does. So I could also have run this using like Skia GTK. So it would have, it would have appeared as the same thing. So we can. It runs on all platforms, basically all supported platforms. It's powered by Skia Sharp. And so all platforms that Uno targets have support for the shadow container, and will look the same across all and act the same. So yes, absolutely.
There's that's very great, and the fact that it's Skia Sharp underneath, and for which we had to make some PRs to make to enhance the behavior so that it works properly on the web specifically. There were some issues there that we had to enhance, and that's very nice to see that we it's a group effort to get that feature running. There's another question by Mark Patterson that's asking, how about true shadows capturing the image underneath and darkening the image capture on the shadow area? I don't believe that's what we're doing currently. I mean, we're basically generating an image that has the shadows and then using alpha to do compositing. It's not capturing the image properly. It's really actual compositing.
Right. Yeah. So it's not. Yes. Like basically, I don't know all the details right of it, but yes, it's we're compositing the shadows underneath and on top. We have a canvas there that's using the shadows, the Skia image shadows for top and bottom, using the SK-XAML canvas views to generate all that for us. Yeah. Exactly,
and so that's a pretty cool feature. So go ahead, Steve, if you had some more to add on the shadows.
Well, for shadows, that's good for what we can look at. So there's a lot of stuff that you can build with it. So the neumorphic styles were just to show sort of fun things that you can do. But yeah, it would be really great to see how people use this, how people can play around with this and wrap whatever you want in a shadow container and go crazy. You can do whatever you want with it. And so the next cool thing that was released as part of the 4.10 release that's supported now within Uno themes for Uno material and the Uno toolkit is lightweight styling. So within the gallery, again, I'm going to stay in the gallery for these demos and in our web app for the gallery. If we go to the theming section and we can look at lightweight styling. So lightweight styling, basically, just to give a little precursor, is enabling us to customize the control of, customize the appearance of your controls by adjusting individual resource keys rather than completely redefining or recreating styles, right? So as an example, you're using the Uno material controls. You're using the default filled button for a button, like we see here on this. You want to have the background changed. You don't want to have to create a new style that's based on this thing and just override the property for background. And then you have to use that style everywhere. At a page level, at a control level, at a global level, you can just override the specific resource key for that specific style's background, and it will be scoped to whatever you overrode at whichever level and appear that way at any level within the application. The other really interesting thing, which is what we're going to talk about now, is not only does it allow you to do this on public properties like backgrounds, border thicknesses, corner radius, paddings, all those fun things, it also gives you the capabilities to override these brushes, these paddings, these corner radiuses, any of this stuff at the different visual states of your control, right? So obviously at the default state that we're looking at here, we have this default button that has nothing overrode, and we're going to look at the code for it in a second. And we have this overridden button style, right? So obviously the normal visual state background is overridden to be this green. But what if you wanted it to be when it's focused, or when you press it, or when the pointer is over it? I want it to have a different color. I want it to take a different shape. I want it to look and feel differently at different visual states. The only way that you could usually do this would be to obviously create a new style, create a new control template, copy the control template from what is currently there, and play around in the visual states themselves, right? But now we actually expose all these resources as, we actually expose all these properties as resources that are lightweight stylable, right? So if we looked quickly, I know it's a little busy because we're doing a border brush background and foreground, but if we looked quickly, we would see that our overridden button style that we are looking at, that green one up there, obviously the filled button, obviously the filled button background is that light green that we're looking at. But we also say that that filled button background should be a light pink in the pointer over state, right? And in the pressed state, we want it to be a blue. And in the focused state, we want it to be this dark magenta. And so that means that we could do, so the XAML basically, I'll uncheck this, I'll unzoom and I'll come back to it. Whoa. So basically we have our button here, and we're defining within this button resources, the keys that we want to override, right? So it's using the same exact style as the button above. That's the default one. We're not changing the style. We're not changing any of that. We're just overriding specific keys for specific visual states, for specific, in this case, brushes. But you can do this with corner radii, padding, any of that fun stuff. So if we were to look and go back up here, we'd have this button that looks normal. If we you see when we hover over it, it changes. And that's just based on the key override. When we click it, it becomes that steel blue. If we were to focus onto it, to get the focus all the way to the button, it becomes that magenta. So it has all these different customizations that you can do across all the visual states of every single control that is supported within Uno themes for Uno material, as well as the Uno material library for the Uno toolkit. That's sort of just a quick briefer over the power of lightweight styling. Lightweight styling is very, very, very interesting. And if you wanted to read more, we have a whole page dedicated to it in our themes and toolkit documentation for lightweight styling. And the only other thing I wanted to mention before I sign off is all lightweight styling resources, like you can see here, are themable, and so they're in theme dictionaries, meaning that you can play around with them at different light or default/dark themes. So you can see here we invert the colors based on whether it's a light theme or a dark theme for the button that you can override. And so this is doable for all the controls. You can do it at a per control, at a page level, at an app level, and all the available lightweight styling resource keys are available for each control. And you can see them here, the type, the values they are by default, and everything that's available for you to override is all in the documentation on our website. So that's it for lightweight styling.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Having having smaller styles is always something that's very interesting. We always having to copy styles to make some minor change with the colors. That is something, if you had to do this, and now you can do this with our styles for the material. That's very nice. So thank you, Steve, for all that demo. I think we had one question. That was not for lightweight styling. That was for actually MAUI controls. Just going to answer that one. So actually, this is for Nick, which is going to come up just right after. MAUI control embedding increases app size, and it would have UNO libraries and MAUI libraries. So my guess is yes, it actually does, because it includes everything. So I think it bundles in everything with the MAUI content plus the libraries that you're pulling in. So yeah, it definitely increases the size. So it comes at a cost. It's not too big, I would guess.
Yeah.
But that is something to consider when you're adding controls, MAUI controls inside your app.
And don't forget, some of that will get removed out by the linker. So,
Exactly.
It's not going to add the entire bloat of everything. It'll just cut back on what you actually need. So
exactly, and particularly with regards to MAUI, so we're not including the full MAUI content, and so the linker, when you make sure to have the linker enabled, and that's something that is of good interest there. So that's it for the lightweight sliding theme and shadow. Thank you, Steve. And we're going to go back to Nick, which has some more goodness to show us about the MAUI embedding.
Yeah, so look, we're back on MAUI embedding, and we've got a couple of more vendors to show just quickly, and then we're going to finish up with a demo of hot restart. So actually, let's wait until my screen comes up. And we'll get going. Now, for those who remember the very beginning of the session, I was demoing on Windows, and I was demoing with Visual Studio. So we're going to switch across to Visual Studio Code, but I'm still on a Windows machine. And what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be loading, going through 3 sets of demos for the MAUI embedding. All of these are going to be VS Code connected remotely to my Mac. And so this is the power of the UNO extensions coupled with some of the built-in capabilities of VS Code. So the first thing we're going to do is actually connect to my remote machine. So you can see here that I've already got my remote machine set up. This does require you to have the remote extension installed both on the client, so my Windows machine, so VS Code running on the Windows, and VS Code running on the Mac. So you install the same component there. And so once you've got that set up, you establish a connection, and so it's going to go ahead and try and connect. It's already got my credentials stored, so I just need to put my password in. And once it's got that connection, it then prompts you to open a folder. You can actually also pick, open repositories, etc. And this browse here, as it indicates, is actually on the remote server. So this is actually browsing on my Mac. So I'll go down here to projects, samples. Let's pick the MAUI embedding one. And we're going to go ahead and use Grape City's demo. So just to note that these demos are all available on the UNO samples repository. So for all of the demos that we've shown today, they are on the repository. Some of them will need license keys. So for things like Grail, you'll need a license key in order to run it. But the demos are all there. There are also walkthroughs for each of the vendors in our documentation as well. So good getting started guide there. So let's go ahead and open this folder. And this will have a similar structure to what we've seen on the other demos that you've seen. Now, to shortcut this slightly, rather than me running it, the interface down the bottom here is exactly the same as what you saw for Pedro when Pedro was demoing it. But remember that the distinction here is that I'm running this on Windows. And so these are the options that I have for debugging, but I'm debugging on the Mac. So running on Windows, actually the debugger and Visual Studio Code that I'm editing is on Windows. The execution is going to be done on the Mac. So when I'm picking here, I'm going to say run on iOS. This is actually going to run on the simulator that is across on my Mac. So I'll go ahead and actually run this. And we'll go ahead and start that. And I will bring in my Mac. And hopefully what we should see is when this kicks off, it will actually go ahead and run that on the simulator. So you can see it's deploying there. It is relatively quickly. If you've ever deployed from the current instance of Visual Studio to an iOS device or even to the simulator, it's currently fairly slow. I would argue that this is significantly quicker, and we're getting there. Whilst that's going, what we might do, because we've got a few of these to get through, I might just switch across to the other instance I had. Actually, we've already got it up and running, so let's pull that back. Okay, so it's launching. And you'll see this is structured similar to the other demos you've seen from Pedro, that we have the nav view at the top there, so we can switch between the controls. And again,
Nick, I don't think we see the image there. Probably shared the first screen. Can you pull it on the first screen?
It's pulled across to the same screen. Interesting, it's not picking up. Let me see if I can add that. Let me just stop screen sharing and present a different screen, share screen. Can you push that up, Jerome?
I can push that up. There we go.
There we go. I wasn't just talking to myself. There you go. There we go. The demo is running on there. Okay, so what we might just do is come back here and just quickly, I want to show just the same thing running on the Mac. So I'll switch across to Catalyst and we'll, again, running on this Mac. So remembering VS Code is running on Windows. I'm going to hit run on this and it's actually going to launch it on the Mac.
That feature of connecting to a Mac or connect to a Linux machine, for that matter, is super powerful. And particularly if you're accustomed to developing on a Windows machine or a Mac machine or maybe an iPad or something, you can continue. You can do that kind of development there, or maybe sometimes I've seen people do that on Chromebooks. It's possible to develop on Chromebook and connect it to a Mac. And continue developing there. So that's definitely possible. It's something that you can use, particularly when you don't have a Mac locally and you haven't bought one, and then you're using something like Mac in Cloud, for instance. You can connect to your Mac that's in the cloud through there, and without having to develop inside or through a VNC server or a remote desktop connection. So I see the app is there.
And the backstory on this one was I was venting to Jerome because I was cursing the pair to Mac capability in Visual Studio, and Jerome mentioned, "Oh, why don't you just use VS Code extensions and just do it remotely?" And it was just like, 5 minutes later, I was up and running, no connection issues. It's been 100% rock solid. It's just like it's been a godsend. It's so
exactly.
Good. All right, so there we go. Grape City running on the Mac. So let me just switch across, and we're just going to switch across and show one of the others. So we're going to show GrailKit. Again, the GrailKit demo is very similar. It's got, in our Mario controls, we've actually got different. So instead of just using the embedded control, we actually have different controls here listed. And each one of those is going to showcase, we go into here, it'll showcase a different control of the Grail toolkit. So this one's the category chart. In our main app, the only difference here is that in our main page, we have multiple Maui hosts, and essentially this navigation, these navigation items is basically just going to hide and show those individual Maui hosts. So let me just check to see, and I might have this already running on my mobile. So we should be able to just do that. And so this is the Grail City toolkit. Sorry, the GrailKit. So we've got a pie chart. We've got a couple of others. So let's pick the line chart and some various options to show and hide various graphs like that. And so then the final one we want to showcase, and let me just change to a different folder on here. We're going to go open folder, and I'm actually going to pick the ArcGIS. We're going to go ahead and run that.
That one has been asked quite a bit.
Yeah.
And shout out to Morton. He's been helping us there.
And so once this, again, it just picks up and loads. Again, I'll pick Catalyst, and we'll go ahead and deploy that again out to the Mac.
Catalyst has the advantage of starting a lot faster than the other targets, even iOS in some cases. It's probably because of signing and all the things that are happening to deploy an actual iOS simulator. So that's quite nice. And the debugging works pretty well as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. So let me just get there.
So we have Dan that wanted to say something.
Yeah. So going back to earlier, I know there was a conversation about the interop between the WinUI side and the Maui side, and the Maui host does have a visual element property that exposes that. So if you need to manipulate anything, or you need to trigger something on your Maui control from the WinUI side, you do have access to do that as well.
So this is what Dan was talking about. So basically so I've referenced the Maui host by name here. So Maui host element dot visual element, and you can see here that you actually get access to that. You can set properties on it and do all of that stuff. So you have access to the same control through the powers of .NET.
That's very good.
All right, let me just show you that running on the Mac because it's launched. And for those who don't know where I'm based in this little town called Sydney, right in here. And kudos to Morton and his awesome map control. You can see roughly where I'm living.
I think there are kangaroos and snakes there.
You should zoom into where I'm living and why I always have internet issues.
Exactly. All right.
Little tiny
so enough running stuff on the Mac. Let's just jump back for a second, and I'm going to stop this running, and we're going to switch back to Visual Studio for the final demo. So we're going to go next. We're going to actually create a new project. So let me go and create. This is my hot restart demo app. Go ahead and create this. And I mentioned before we're going to switch and go through the wizard one more time. This time I'm going to pick the default sort of configuration. So we have these two configurations just basically to help people get started. So if you're familiar with Uno, click the blank if you just want the bare bones and you want to build everything up yourself. If you're interested in all of the component or a lot of the components that the Uno platform brings to the table that we'll go through in 2 seconds, pick the default. But of course, you can customize either. And essentially, the customized screen is the same, irrespective of whether you start with the blank or the default. You just have different starting points. Okay, so we'll go through the default and we'll click customize on that. So the first thing that you're presented with is target framework. So basically, all this is doing is adjusting the target framework identifiers that are in each of the projects. You can do it yourself. So you start on one. If you get it wrong, you can pick a different one. You just change it in the CS proj files. Of course, picking different platforms. So here are literally all of the platforms that Uno supports. And so you can go down here. You can pick the WPF. You can pick Linux frame buffer. The default is basically to support is to pick the various ones that we recommend or most people are interested in. Okay, so you can go and customize that. We've got a couple of different presentation sort of layers that you can pick. So you can either go with MVVM, which I know is a fairly standard pattern for a lot of people, or you can pick MVUX, which is something the Uno team's put together. It is kind of like a very reactive style pattern, and it is the default for the default configuration because we do think that it is a much cleaner way of loading data and keeping your view models relatively simple. Themes, we can pick between Material, which is the default, and Fluent. A lot of apps are built using Fluent Material. But if you like the Windows look and feel, then go with the Fluent look. Extensions offers a whole bunch of stuff, not the least of which is the host builder. So essentially a dependency injection capability. And then that leads into things like navigation, where we have you would have seen it a couple of times, even though we didn't point it out very much, this ability to use things like the navigation view to switch between various controls and hide and show things. And so it's very region-based navigation sort of paradigm. Under projects, you basically have the ability to toggle a server project. So you can either use this for hosting your backend services, or you can actually host the WASM. And you can even debug the WASM target using this server project. So, if you're planning on deploying your WASM app as part of your ASP.NET project, you can grab the server project and actually deploy and debug it that way. Under features, this is where we were enabling MAUI embedding before, but there's a couple of other features here for you allowed to toggle these things on and off, depending on what you want to use. We do have some templated stuff for authentication, so you can go ahead if you want to jumpstart and use things like MSAL. We do present a pattern as well as just including the references. So when you pick these options, it will, bring in some extra pages that actually show you potentially how you can navigate between login page and back to the main page of your application. You can set a couple of application-based properties, things like your application ID and publisher. And then finally, we've got a couple of testing projects that you can toggle on and off. So I'll go ahead and click create, because the purpose of this demo is also to demo the hot restart feature that shipped as part of 4.10. This was a feature that was back available based in the sort of the Xamarin Forms day, but it's been reintroduced back into Uno with the 4.10 release. And so we've got our new application here. And as you can imagine, we've got our targets at the top here, one of which is our mobile targets. And let me just wait until it's stopped building. I think it should be good to go now. So I hit reload. And the question is whether the demo gods are going to be with me, and they are today. So I can click down here. I can go iOS local devices. And this is my no Mac iPhone. So this is my iPhone that's not plugged into my Mac. It's actually plugged directly into my Windows PC. And actually, just to prove the point, I've got Visor running, and this is my iPhone running alongside me on my desk. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy directly to that. Now, this is the first time I've deployed this application to that device. So there, as anyone who's worked with iOS will know, there's various hoops that you have to jump through. Which Visual Studio should prompt me to go through. I think I just got to get through the.
Yeah, it probably will take it a bit. There you go.
Yeah. So kudos to the now MAUI team for enabling this. It's basically they've done a lot of the hard work to basically build these dialogues and basically get all of the certificates and the provisioning profiles and all of that nonsense that you have to deal with as an iOS developer sorted out. So all I do is next. Pick a team, because I've got an enterprise license. If you've got a personal one, then there's a couple of prompts that you need to go through to add in your personal credentials. But now it's automatically provisioning is complete. So I hit finish, and that's it. It's going to help go and complete the process. It's going to deploy it out to the device. And if I bring over Visor again, we should see that it's going to be deploying out hopefully another app. There we go. And once it's deployed, what we should see is back in Visual Studio, we'll get another prompt to basically say, hey, you've actually got to launch your app on the iOS device. So I'll do that. And that prompt will go away automatically. And there is our app actually running. And you can see in the output window, you'll see some execution style output starting to appear. And then in a second or two, our application will actually run up. And I can start to interact with it on my device like so. And we've got some basic navigation. And as I mentioned, this is, it's got a couple of pages in there because of the default template. It's all wired up with that navigation paradigm that we were talking about before. And that's it. That's as simple as hot restart gets. It's exactly. Like when it works, it's absolutely beautiful. And, it's a full debugging experience. So you can set breakpoints in your Visual Studio and they'll get hit. And it's just, it saves you having to ever deal with a Mac.
Exactly. That's, no Mac does for Windows developers is pretty much, it deploys faster, it debugs faster. You don't have to have a Mac next to you. So that's pretty nice. There is few restrictions that I wish the MAUI team would lift. Like you can't open a file, or you can't use the camera, things like that, mostly because there are plist information that you cannot change. But that's probably something that they will fix very soon. So that's one of the cool things. And it's something that's completely transparent for everyone. You update to Uno 4.10 and you get that new feature that's available right away. In previous version it didn't work, but now it's just available, so you can enjoy that deployment.
And it's worth noting, so things like the startup experience doesn't have the extended splash screen that would normally appear in the app. And then the other question that often comes up about the no Mac experience is, okay, well, can I build and deploy to the store without a Mac? And the answer is still no. You need a Mac for that final mile. But what we typically do is actually set up a CI process that uses a Mac build agent. And that way you never even have to have a Mac. And so this is a massive boon for people who are Windows centric like myself.
Exactly. A mix of CI and test flight is generally good.
Yeah. And Dan's asked me to call out one feature, which is that navigation regions that we talked about, not to be confused with Prism regions. So Prism's a different sort of navigation framework that Dan's obviously one of the maintainers for, and that has a region-based paradigm for doing navigation as well. So the two are subtly different. So
yes.
Anyway, that's Hot Restart in a nutshell.
Very good. So that is it. It's the rundown of everything that we've pushed to Uno 4.10. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you everyone for all the questions. And as I mentioned on the discussions, if you like what you saw, give us a star on the repository, the Uno repository. We'll definitely enjoy it. And ask us questions. Go to our discussions, Discord, Twitter, and others, and we'll be glad to answer that. So that's it. Thanks everyone, and see you again next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye everyone.